There we go. So we're going to start with DELC operations team intro and some upcoming work. So we have today a few guests. So we have Cooper Brown, who is our Chief Operating Officer. And we also have Serena here, who is our Deputy Director, Chief of Programs. And I feel like there are at least 6 other titles that she is holding right now. And I believe Teresa Waite is also on the call as well. Yep, I see. There you are. You're on my screen. So I'm just going to hand it over to them and let them introduce themselves.
Thanks, Hillary. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cooper Brown. As Hillary said, I am ELD DELC's Chief Operating Officer, and really excited to be here with you today and have a few moments to kind of share where we are and what we've got going on. But maybe before doing that, I'll pass the mic to Serena for any introduction she wants to provide.
I was just here a little while ago. So Serena Stoudemire, Deputy Director, Chief of Programs, and interim CCP Manager as we're transitioning the child care policy over from ODHS to ELD DELC. So until we get a new CCP Manager on, I'm acting in that role as well. And thank you and welcome, everyone. And I'll pass it on to Teresa.
Thank you, Serena. I'm Teresa Waite. I am the Director of Grants Management here at the Early Learning Division, soon to be DELC. It also encompasses contracts management, and we work really closely with our program partners on most of the fiscal aspects of grant and contract administration. I've met some of you over the years, and some of you are new, but thank you for having us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us today. I put in the chat a list of bios for the rest of our operations team leaders. So some of them may be popping on here as we chat to introduce themselves directly, but if not, I wanted folks to just have a list of who's sitting in some of these seats, because we are, as I think as everyone knows, changing and growing and evolving a lot at the moment. And so today, my hope was that we could introduce ourselves and the leaders from our operations team and share a little bit about where we are and where we're going as this soon-to-be full-fledged agency, which is DELC, really from the kind of operational perspective. So as mentioned, I'm Cooper Brown. I came aboard back in February as the Chief Operating Officer. Prior to coming to DELC, I was the Oregon Department of Transportation's Assistant Director of Operations. And in that role, I led the delivery and operations arms of ODOT for the past few years. Prior to that, I worked as the Chief of Staff for the Oregon Transportation Commission. And prior to coming to state government, my world was really international affairs, actually, and I worked out of DC for a while. So I don't have a really deep experience in early learning and childcare policy, but I was really excited to come to this role and to come to this agency at this pivotal moment, not only because it's really unique and exciting to be part of an agency that's evolving and forming and really being stood up in the way that DELC's being stood up, but really primarily because of the mission. When I think about supporting Oregon's families and children, especially those that are the most at risk, the most in need, I can't think of a more important mission than that. So I'm really excited to be part of that. Having been in the saddle now for a couple months and working and getting to know the folks in this world, both in DELC and then partners like yourselves and the groups that you all lead and work with, has been really inspiring. And it makes me even more excited and passionate and appreciative of having this opportunity to be a part of this terrific team and the work that we all do. In terms of the operations team, though, I think most of you might know this, but if not, as DELC, we're bringing in-house a lot of functions and units that previously were dispersed and we were getting from other sources, namely ODE and ODHS. But as DELC, we're going to have obviously our own grants management team that Teresa leads and that she introduced, but we also have a procurement team internal to DELC now, an IT team, a budget and accounting team, as well as a data and analytics and project management offices. All of those fall within the operations division, as we're calling it, of DELC. Now, on July 1, when we become DELC, we're also going to be receiving those units that are coming over from ODHS, those employee-related daycare units. And one of those, the direct pay unit, will also be part of the operations team. But again, that happens on July 1. So at a high level, just wanted to kind of frame up for everyone what operations means when we talk about operations within DELC. So again, I think most folks are tracking kind of where we are in this journey. But as we become DELC, we're really looking at how do we best fulfill the promise of House Bill 3073? How do we expand and strengthen Oregon's early learning systems? How do we ensure that we're really serving children and families as best as we can? Now, July 1 is going to be a big milestone in that evolution, in that work, when we officially become DELC. And a lot of folks have been working for a really long time to make this a reality. And right now we're really in crunch time, making sure that we have all the operational and administrative pieces in place to seamlessly transition our programs, hopefully have July 1 be nothing more than just another day for most folks. For providers, for you all, for the folks that we serve, we're hoping that it's not going to be this dramatic moment in terms of change, that it's actually, we're again intending it to be seamless. But a transition nonetheless, and really more behind the scenes. So we're working feverishly at the moment to make sure that's the reality. While July 1 is going to be really important for us, I think it's also really important that we remember that July 1 and becoming DELC officially is a milestone for us and is not the finish line. Achieving the vision and outcomes that we've set, that have been set forth for us in 3073 is going to require intentional and sustained effort within our agency for a long time. And again, July 1 is a significant milestone in that journey, but it's not the end of the journey. And as we do this work, we're really looking closely at how we've operated in the past and are focused on ensuring that as we move forward, we're consistent and we're transparent with how we operate. I'll be honest, I've seen some inconsistencies in my brief time here in how we've administered our programs. For instance, what we've defined as allowable expenses for different pots of money haven't been clear, and frankly, I think we've allowed some things that we won't be allowing moving forward. Not because we're moving the goalposts, so to speak, on what's allowable, but really because I think, from what I've seen at times, and I'm not trying to really kind of unpack the past, but I think that in some instances we haven't recognized where those goalposts have been. So what this means for you and your fellow grantees is it's going to be really, really important for you all to please ensure that the guidance on allowable costs for different meetings and events are reviewed closely prior to you committing any funds. And if you have questions, or you feel like there might be some questions around an event or around something that you're looking to pay for with your grant money, please ask us so we can be part of that conversation. And it's our desire, we feel our mission to support you all and help us get to a place of support and find creative solutions. But we need to also make sure that we're adhering to the requirements of each pot of money and being good stewards of those dollars. We're going to be working on providing exactly what that means in terms of kind of clear guidance in both policy and just separate guidance here in the future. And that might look like some facts. It might look like other documents. And it's really, we intend it to be a conversation with you all so we can make sure we're getting you what you need along those lines. And I guess the other thing I'd say is, as we continue to evolve and look at our kind of administrative practices and how we're managing our programs, any changes to that are not meant to be because we're trying to be overly bureaucratic. It's really to ensure that we're being fully accountable to the requirements associated with all the different funding pots and streams that we administer. I think personally that's really important for us to ensure that we have the trust and confidence of the public, of our legislative leaders, and of all the folks that we serve. And I think for us as DELC, who have a lot of eyes on us and will continue to in the near future, maintaining that trust and confidence is going to be really crucial for us moving forward, and ensuring that we continue to receive the resources to support the providers and families that I know we all care deeply about. So my hope today was to come and share those thoughts and a little bit of that vision with kind of where we are and where we're going with you, introduce you to the team. And again, I'm sorry that not everyone is here, but since Teresa's here, we'll say we've got the best member of the team here. Oh, this is being recorded, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But we do have a really strong team. And, you know, as we go through this work together, I'm hopeful that we can build relationship. I know some of us are new, and really work closely with you and your teams to ensure we're meeting our collective needs. And if you ever have questions, ever in doubt, please reach out to us, and we're here to support. But in the meantime, happy to answer questions if you have them. But again, thank you for giving us a little bit of time to chat and visit with you today.
Yeah, hey Cooper, this is Jared. I'm here. I really resent that Teresa comment that you made about about her being the best person on the team.
Sorry about that, Jared.
Sorry, I got here close to quarter after. I thought that's what we're supposed to jump on. So I was in the middle of when you were talking, Cooper. Do you want me to just do a really quick introduction?
That'd be great if you would.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jared Chalk. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Early Learning Division and the Department of Early Learning and Care as we transition. I come to ELD and the Department of Early Learning and Care by way of DAS, Enterprise Information Services. So I have an IT background with the state, with transportation, or the Chariots, our mass transit agency here in Salem before that, and I come by way of Montana, actually. So it's great to see everybody. I'm excited about the work that we all do together in IT. A lot of our work's behind the scenes. We maintain the technology systems from laptops, but also even to the servers that folks connect to, the databases where we store important data, and the data sharing agreements that we have. So a lot of very important but behind the scenes work, and happy to be here and join the operations team and field any unlikely technology questions that we might have. So I'll turn it back to Cooper.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, appreciate you volunteering to answer questions. I'm surprised we're still speaking terms, but appreciate it. Well, I see some questions in the chat, and so we certainly take a stab at answering those, and then if there's others, happy to address those as well. And it looks like really if I'm reading these correctly, allowable cost is front and center, and recognizing what is allowable and what's not. And I jokingly usually say that I'm going to pass all the hard questions to Teresa, but in this case, I really think I might pass this one to Teresa to give a little bit more detail, but on what is allowable and what's not. When it comes to things like, though, before I pass it to her, when it comes to things like food in general, food is not an allowable expense. When meals are over per diem, in general, those are going to be highly scrutinized and are not going to be allowed. And we can certainly cite kind of where we're making those determinations from. A lot of that is based on existing best practice and rules that are out there. But I think some of the real challenge and I think opportunity for us to figure out how do we work through those kind of gray spaces that maybe aren't delineated in grant agreements in terms of activities and expenses, and ensure that we're meeting y'all's needs to the degree we can, but again, also being responsible to the requirements that we have on each of those pots. But Teresa, do you want to speak to the work we're doing internally to really define those allowable expenses a little bit better?
Yes, thanks, Cooper. So we are working through our DELC policies around allowable cost, and then how we govern that. The policies that we're putting in place are not meant to restrict our ability to make an agreement for a specific purpose that might fall outside of that. So we are trying to be really reasonable. And as we have things, we will be sharing those out. In addition, once we have a lot of our policy nailed down, we will be rolling out a guidance document for grantees, but the guidance document won't cover everything because we understand the nuances between different grants. So these will put out the basic principles and our general guidance, and then we will work with program folks to make sure that individual grants that may have some nuance have some information there as well. And as always, your grant manager is available for questions that you have, and grant manager for Hubs, Carla, works closely with her program partners on those things. But some of the things we're developing around allowable cost is not just around meals, but about things such as, we've had things come up such as purchases with gift cards and some other items that we're developing the guidance around those. So, and we should be seeing that roll out shortly because we're getting down to the final stages and having it reviewed at this point.
Can I add something to Teresa? This is Serena. You all are gonna, and it's not all food. I know there's some different areas because I know you have parenting programs where food is covered.
Right.
And I just want to say a lot of this is not new. A lot of this is us getting our house in order. We have to get our house in order before we do a lot of things. And there's a lot of improvements, or I should say, going to the next level. And that's what we're doing, going to the next level in doing so. And we want to be, as Cooper said, good stewards of our work. So as we're going through internal changes and looking at all our policies and procedures and what we have not been getting right, it's about us setting up things the right way. And again, getting our house in order so that we can go to the next level, be good partners with you all and not change things in the middle of the game, right? So that we have structures and procedures and processes in place from the onset as we're doing this. And so this is a start of us doing that. And I did talk to Cooper in between our other meeting, and we said some of this in our earlier meeting that we're going to develop FAQs for all of the programs too, as we're going along doing this work, moving things forward, because we can't be a one size fit all because our regions, our hubs are all different, but what's the foundational work that we can do that's going to be across everything? And we know that some things, there's going to be different nuances too for a lot of those different programs. So I just want to start there and then we can go ahead and answer questions. Well, I'll let Teresa go ahead and answer questions.
Thanks, Serena. And I see a couple of hands up. I think Renee, you were first, and then I see Dorothy, and then it looks like Kelly, you have some more questions in the chat. So maybe Renee.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Cooper and I have already kind of done a little workaround with talking about the food issues, and with so much new ELD leader or DELC leadership, I would invite this new leadership team to really engage with us as humble learners about what the Early Learning Hub system does and is prior to issuing new policies, new guidance. There's a lot of learning that does need to happen on your end, not just on our end. And I think that is the right place to start. And I would welcome those conversations sooner rather than later. And by sooner, I mean prior to July 1 would be fantastic. And so, yeah, I would love to, and I've already shared some of the backstory with the other directors, and we are different than state government, and that template just does not fit our work. And so there's really an opportunity to dig in, to learn, and to make policies that make sense to support the early learning system.
Thanks, Renee. Yeah, well, I can't speak for every other new leader within ELD DELC, but I can speak for myself. And yeah, I'm happy to learn about the work, and I think that's really important to your point for sure. We need to. I guess the thing I would say in response, in addition to that, is there are some requirements that, independent of learning about the programs and the work, they're just hard requirements that we haven't adhered to in the past, and some of those things are just pretty immovable. And I don't say that to sound like I'm not open to the conversations, but I also want to set really clear expectations in terms of some of the kind of practices that are inbounds and out of bounds in terms of what we can allow. I don't want to. I think it's irresponsible if I or the others kind of equivocate on that and make it sound like, well, there's more wiggle room on some of these areas than there is. That said, I think the overarching thing that I know we're all really talking a lot about and care about is how do we work within those strictures, within those bounds, to be supportive and find creative solutions for you all to do the things that you need to do and make sure that you can support providers in all the important ways that you're doing it. So that is first and foremost for us. But as we do that, that creativity might look different, and those creative answers might look different than the answers in the past. And so I just want to be really clear that I see that as where we're going, not because I want to be the one that's coming in and saying this is setting a different course just based on my own kind of whims. That's not it at all. We're reading what are the actual kind of language, what's the guidance, what's the kind of the hard letter of requirements, and we're interpreting those in ways that it looks like we might not have interpreted in the past. But all that to say, I'm happy to engage with you all, learn about the programs. I think is important. I think across our teams, we need to be doing that better. And we've talked about that internally. How do we all know what each team is kind of responsible for so we can be one collective kind of coordinated body that supports CCR and ours, supports all the people that we provide, and you're not getting different answers depending on who you're talking to. And that's another big piece of the work as well, is that we're trying to get our house in order in that regard, as Serena put it as well.
Yeah,
So
we really look forward to digging into the conversation with you. Thank you.
Okay, Renee, thank you. I appreciate it. Dorothy, I see your hands up too.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some computer issues. I think I just wanted to, I hear what you're saying about there are things that are immovable, and I think Jillian put this in the chat. I think it's helpful to understand, what does immovable mean? Is this a policy that is like an OAR? Is this a state legislative piece? Because there may be things that feel immovable to you that we want to advocate should be moved. And who we advocate that to may not be you all, but that might be someone else.
Yep.
And I just want to give the example of, I hear gift cards as like an area of things that need to be potentially tightened around. And where that begins to raise red flags for me is thinking about the flexibility that we have in order to stand up family leadership councils and engage families and reimburse them in a meaningful way for their time that isn't just food, or that isn't like a contract with them and creating more red tape and barriers. If we're going to meaningfully engage parents as decision makers in our state agencies, which is what we do, not just with DELC, but across agencies, we have to reimburse them for that time. And sometimes that looks different than what is traditional. I don't want to exclude the opportunities to truly reimburse families for what they deserve because something is currently immovable. If it's we can't do this, like this is not an allowable expense, and that becomes a barrier for us in reimbursing parents for their time as part of our process, then I want to know as a hub leader, who do I advocate for that to be changed? And that's okay if that's not you. I just need to know that. So I just give that example, and I just ask that we hold at the center of any of these kind of tightening of restrictions. Will this create a new barrier for us in the way in which we are engaging not just providers, but parents to be leaders in this work moving forward?
Thank you, Dorothy. Very well put. Yeah, I certainly, I think that's a great example, and I agree with that. It makes a lot of good sense that we have to keep our kind of eye on what is it that we're trying to do. And again, you know, I feel like I think us defining what we're talking about as being immovable is perfectly fair and perfectly reasonable, and we need to be doing that. And so we will do that. And some of those things, to your point, might be movable, depending on who you have pushing. So that's totally fair. We will show our homework on how we're making these determinations for certain. And I don't want to also get lost in this conversation that we want to come to creative solutions with you about it. So for instance, I personally agree really strongly. We need to reimburse the folks that we're asking something of. When I was at ODOT, we were the first agency to start a reimbursement program for all the folks that were around our committees that we were asking to give of their time and their resource to help us make better decisions. We have to reimburse folks for that time. I firmly believe that. It's just figuring out how to do that within the structures that exist, that might result in slightly different answers than you've had in the past. And that's really what I'm trying to get across to folks, is that we're there to partner with you and come up with the right answers to do the things you need to do. It's just those answers might look differently because we're interpreting some of this language as more immovable than maybe we interpreted it before. So I don't know if that
Yeah,
helps.
no, I hear that. And I would just contend that when I hear the work within the systems that we have in place, I would just offer that I believe that we have systems in place that don't actually work for parents. And so that might be things that aren't completely in the control of DELC, and that's understandable. But I want us to center that systems don't actually work for parents often in government.
Fair point. Yep.
Hey, Cooper, I'm gonna help you out with some chat box reading here. So Brenda agreed with Dorothy. Fenton says that federal policy varies as well with MCV, so maternal, infant, early childhood health, home visiting has significantly expanded their definition of allowable expense, for example. And then Evan asks, are we primarily talking about federal funds and things with very specific funding designations?
I think we're talking about all the funds, and I think we're looking at, I'm not comfortable to say what's on the plate and what's not on the plate in terms of what we're reviewing, because I think we're doing a comprehensive review of all the funding streams to make sure that we are being accountable to all of those requirements. And yes, they look different depending on those pots of money. But Teresa, do you want to speak to any of that?
Sure. We definitely are looking across. We have folks who are better versed in federal requirements, especially across some of our more specific things, such as Title 4B2 and Title 20. So we're looking at those. A lot of those have more specific projects and program work attached to them. The state funding, even though it gets budgeted to us as a program, the funding itself does not come in the same package that a lot of the federal project money comes in. And that's why we're having to take a look at both our federal and state dollars to review requirements. I do want to say that a lot of what we're trying to look at in policy right now is where can we be broad so that we don't tie anybody into a corner unnecessarily. And that's a big part of the conversations and the work in drafting policy that we're having to go through right now.
And Lisa, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi Cooper, it's nice to meet you and welcome aboard. As we're engaging in this work, I really hope that it's from the perspective and assumption that we as hubs and hub leaders are being good stewards of the funds, and that we have been working with the ELD in partnership on the expenditures of funds expenditures and all of the programmatic decisions. And so I just hope that it is coming from that place, that we are working to do things in the best right way, and recognizing the community, as we've already talked about it, and meeting parents where they are, doing things in a way that is respectful for parents, all those things. I hope that is one of the very first things that is really thought about. Also, I am hopeful too that we will be building this together, and not here's the FAQ, here's the policy, live with it. It is, let's have a conversation about these. This is what we're finding we DELC need to do better, and this is where we need to do this partnership together, and that you're listening to and hearing about how we've been approaching that as we've been working directly with families and directly with partners in our communities on these really important initiatives. Also request that there is time for system change, and that, because you all have systems, we too have systems, and it takes we have to also calibrate how we're doing things as well, should there need to be any sort of changes. So I'm hopeful that we can just keep all of those principles in mind as we move forward.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, well said. And yes, I want to be really explicit. I think we all recognize that and respect the work that you all are doing and your expertise, and that you all are operating in good faith and in accordance with the guidance that you've gotten, and doing the things that you need to do responsibly. I don't doubt that for 1 minute. So I want to say that loud and clear. Your point about doing this in partnership, yeah, I think that's the only way it's going to work. We need to be having conversation about this, and as you say, I really like the way you framed it, describing more in detail when it's ready, what are those things that we're feeling like are unmovable. Have that conversation with you, figure out if there are other paths. Certainly that's reasonable, and we can commit to doing that with you. Again, though, to Renee's comment, I want to be clear that there are some things that really we might not have as much wiggle room on, and I'm not saying that to start from a place of no, I'm saying that to just be clear. But again, let us define what that is, and then we can have the conversation and we can talk more about it with you all, and really unpack that. I want to give an example of one of the kind of things that came up recently, and why I'm here today, and why I think it's important we have these conversations. I saw recently an email along the lines of saying something along the lines of, for hub coordination funds, we recognize that we can use these funds for pretty much anything we need to, as long as we tie it back to kids and families. That's not an accurate statement. There are other requirements that we have to have in order to use those funds. And I want to make sure that we're being really transparent with you all, that if that's not the message that you all have received in the past, we explain why that is the case to you moving forward. And again, not at all placing blame on you all and the important work that you've done historically. Don't think it's really that helpful to place blame on anyone in this. I want to make sure that we're working, moving forward together, like you're saying, and unpacking what it is we're seeing and what we anticipate being able to allow and not allow, and then have those conversations with you so we can all be on the same page. But I certainly do not feel like it's a hub. It's any kind of disregard or lack of kind of responsible action on the hub's part. That's not what I'm saying at all. So I want to be really unequivocal on that. But yeah, we will definitely circle back with you once we do a little bit more work on defining what are those pieces that we think we need to address in a different way. And we can have conversations about that before we, kind of write them more formally, to make sure that we're all on the same page and we can roll up our sleeves and talk through them. Does that work for folks? I know it's not ideal, but does that work as the next step kind of commitment?
I think it'd be helpful to have the Hub 101 conversation first, so that there's a broad general understanding of what hubs do and what we're accountable for and what our outcomes are, and then have the conversation that you're talking about.
Okay.
And Gillian, this is Serena, and I understand that, but I also want to reiterate too something that Cooper said, that we didn't always get it right on our side. And so I go back to us having to fix our systems, because we got to fix our systems to get it right before we can even say, what we can and cannot do as we're going out. So I just want to make sure that you all hear that from us. We're coming, being honest, being transparent, trying to be accountable, is that we really have to get things right on our end as we're asking you all to do things, and going forth, and to be accountable, be intentional with the work that we're trying to do. So again, I just want to reiterate that we're not saying that, we're saying that we got to get it right. I just think that, and Alyssa and I did talk about it, said that you all used to have a big meeting where you came together at least once or twice a year. So if we can get that back on the books before July 1st too, to have a meeting so that we can have these conversations, I think that would be a great idea. And we can talk about that too, as we're starting to move things forward. And maybe I can have maybe Brooke or Sherry do a doodle poll to see what's the best dates for us to maybe like have a half a day retreat or something like that. So that way we can work things out.
A meeting for all of us together? Because I think we've got a meeting or a date held in June, do we not?
We do? Want to do that one? Want to do that?
Well,
Can
I
we
think
extend it to make it a half a day or a half a day or something like that? So we can,
Serena, yeah, we are planning the start of our learning collaboratives again, and
Okay.
we're holding 22nd. So I think we could build that in. CCR&R directors will be there too. So that might be a really good conversation
okay.
to include this.
Okay. Does that sound, you guys mind if we kind of invite ourselves?
And can I add that in my mind, we share the same house. And so hopefully our rooms won't fall apart while someone is fixing the house. And so that's my concern that, you know, I think we share the same house.
Well, Gillian, we do to a point, but now since we're getting our, like Cooper said, we have our own operations. We're no longer sharing with ODE. You know, what does that look like? You know what I'm saying? We have to get that stood up to complete the house, right? Because we didn't have our own then. We were dependent upon ODE for procurement, budgeting, contracting, and all that. But now we have it ourselves. And so we have expectations from the 11 big expectations from the governor that we have to do to, you know, get our operations right, and not just for the hubs, but for everything that we have under our umbrella, and also to report and align with the governor's office and DAS. And so what does that look like now that we have our own? So we have to we're creating systems and structures too. So it's not just one, but it's for our entire agency. And then what does that look like? So we're accountable to we're accountable to the governor, we're accountable to you all, but we have to stand up all these new things that we have, and standing that up, how do we get it right?
And that makes sense. The only point I was trying to make is where do we fit in the house?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You fit. But I think having you fit. And let's not say fit. Where's our seat? How do we where's that inclusion? Where's that belonging? Where's that access? So, and as I said earlier, so we're not just hearing, not just listening, but we're also hearing and creating that space for everyone to be able to have clear and concise communications and have better relationships as we start to build this even better house, right? Or this even better systems and structures that we have in place, so that we don't have to keep starting all over. You know, where do we go? How do we go forward together? It's about forward movement.
I'm going to jump in, and I just want to be cognizant of time. We have a packed agenda as always.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. These are important conversations to have. And I want to make sure that hub directors had a chance to voice anything that they wanted to share. So thank you, Cooper and Serena and Jared and Teresa, for joining the meeting. You're all welcome to stay and listen and learn if you have time, and understand if you need to jump off.
And can I just go ahead and say that we are invited? Are you guys okay with us coming to the June 22nd meeting and maybe possibly to being there, being on the agenda and getting things done?
Yeah, Serena, that's great. So what we did is we took our equity community practice group and said, how are we envisioning this? And so we actually have a team of CCR directors and hub directors who are helping build the agenda. So this works perfectly because we're building the agenda now. So
Okay.
we can, and it really is designed to do state systems work. So this will be great.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Look forward to that
Thank you.
conversation. Thank you.
Marge, can I jump in from the chat box here? We do have a question that is grants and coordinated enrollment related. Any idea when we might see contracts? So hubs of the coordinated enrollment contract, of course, which the current one ends June 30, and then the general coordination, which currently ends September 30. So I will let grants or coordinated enrollment speak to that first one.
I can probably talk about that real quick. So the coordinated enrollments one is currently going through the processes at the state, and we are hoping to have it in June. A big piece of it is that we have to wait until we know what the exact funding allocations are. And so we're just waiting to hear back on that. In the meanwhile, a lot of the language is going through our DOJ process and things of that nature. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, early June. But as soon as I have more information, I will be sharing that with you guys. And then the hubs one will probably be more closer to late summer because it doesn't end until September 30th. So we have a little bit more wiggle room on that one.
And could you, I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up, but has there been any discussion about changes in any funding formula or even what the funding levels would be, particularly for the coordinated enrollment, since that ends first, or any changes coming up that we should be aware of?
I believe so, but Teresa, do you have any more insight on the funding formula pieces of it? If there's going to be updates to that?
I have not been a part of the funding formula for coordinated enrollment. Usually when we're crossing a biennium, we start with what the current service level is and make our adjustments from there. So I will need to probably talk to, boy, this is another one of those areas where changes in staff make it a little more complex. Checking with my partner Carmen to see what she might have from when Anne was managing coordinated enrollment, and then working with our budget office to see what they have.
So Carla, I hear you saying that we obviously gotta wait for the legislators, but last year we have to wait all the way until October or November to hear about the dollar amount, the allocation followed by the contract. So how's it gonna look like this year? Are we gonna wait for multiple months until we know how much capacity we can sustain or expand? How does it work like?
For hubs or coordinated enrollment? The reason I asked.
Coordinated enrollment.
Okay. And I wasn't here last summer, so I don't know how long it took for the process. Teresa?
Yep. There were a lot of factors that went into the delay in agreements and funding this last funding cycle for coordinated enrollment. By having our own procurement shop who is in the process right now of getting those agreements developed so that they're ready, and having a process of using current service level to make sure that we have funds to move forward. And then if we have to amend to add or adjust afterwards, we'll do that. We're streamlining the process to make sure those agreements are in place. You should be seeing your agreements before July 1 so that we can move funding into the grant management system as soon as it's, what's the word I need? As soon as everything's been resolved financially so that we have our exact dollar amounts to go in, and then we'll make adjustments. But we're working on all of our agreements so that we can have them in grantees' hands, our June 30 expired agreements in grantees' hands in June so that we can move quickly.
And in the hypothetically speaking world of seeing another expansion, what does that thing mean to us? So I get it. I hear you that there is a contract for continuation of service, existing service level, but if there is a significant expansion, how are we going to be able to absorb that thing quickly if that's the situation?
I am not anticipating a significant expansion, but I think Serena might know more about what to expect, or Dana with regard to program expansion at this point. I'm not anticipating one, but there may be some more things on the horizon. I will say that if there is one, it wouldn't be in the first year of the biennium, because usually we can't do an RFA for those that fast.
Yeah.
Am I speaking, Serena?
I was going to say, is Christopher still on the call? I don't see him, but I haven't heard of the expansion just yet. And I was out last week, so.
Dina, I think you were on earlier.
There's
Yeah,
Christopher.
Dina. Great.
There's
Dina or Christopher, if you could speak to any possible expansion in preschool promise this year. for this biennium?
I'm not aware of any. I can't speak to any.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Dana here. Hello. I was just here listening. But in regards to like preschool promise, right now what we share at the last grantee meeting is that we hear our community. We know that there's, some of our programs with the wait list and some of those pieces. So, we said there's no plans for expansion like during this like first year, but we are getting an interest because we know that we have heard from some of you about like, hey, there's families waiting for some of these programs, right? So we're getting interest, but there's also like, as we're coming into our own agency and like working with procurement, like right now, our priority is to go ahead and get our current agreements up and running to ensure that there's no delays with like current service levels. And then like developing a process, with procurement on what does our reallocation process look like in some of those pieces. So right now we're really just focused on current service levels, but we are in that grantee interest form, we did ask some questions to some of our grantees about their interest for additional slots, more for like a survey type of data gathering. So, thank you.
Okay. Are we feeling good? Feeling okay? I saw a couple head nods. Okay, I'm going to keep us flowing then. Thanks all. Christopher Brown, since you hopped off, I see you. I see your, since you came on camera. That's what I meant to say, didn't get off camera. Would you like to talk to us about legislative updates and fill us all in?
Sure. Good morning all, or good afternoon all. My name is Christopher Brown. I am the Government Affairs Manager and Legislative Coordinator for the Early Learning Division, soon to be DELC. I have some information on 3 ELD specific bills. There are several bills that we are tracking, but the only 3 that are DELC specific bills. I'll provide a list of those bills in the chat. So if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to let me know. But in short, so that we have HB 3435, which renamed the Oregon Pre-Kindergarten Program to the Oregon Prenatal to the Oregon Prenatal to Kindergarten Program to reflect the full range of children and families that are served. The program will still be referred to as OPK, and then the bill also removes language that prevents multi-year contract with OPK grantees. This is having a public hearing today for the Senate Committee on Education, with a possible work session scheduled for May 11th. The next bill is HB 3558. This changes references to the Office of Child Care to the Department of Early Learning and Care, which will allow us to share information internally and train non-OCC staff on OCC processes, for example, like the background check procedures. It clarifies several definitions to include child care, subsidized care facility, family, and occasional. It prevents stacking exemptions. We have encountered some situations where license exempt providers that provide care together to avoid licensure. So the bill will prevent those providers from being able to stack those, to stack that care. It shores up provisions aimed at preventing the interference in investigations. It allows for limited enrollment in the central background registry for exempted individuals with the employment-related daycare program by rule. That bill had a work session scheduled yesterday. So they did pass and they move forward. So it is starting on the process. And then the final bill is probably the most important bill for our agency during this legislative session was SB 427. So SB 427 allows DELC to enter into interagency agreements with the Oregon Department of Human Services and the Oregon Department of Education to perform certain functions. This bill is particularly important for maintaining the administrative functions for the employment-related daycare program that ODHS will continue to perform after the ERDC moves to DELC on July 1st. It also clarifies agencies' access to the early learning account. This bill, I'm glad to say this bill was signed by the governor into law, I would say maybe last week. So that was a real big step in us being able to make sure that we have, processes and procedures in place so that we can become, an effective agency on July 1st. And I will include this update I'll include that in the chat. So if anyone wants to physically see those, you'll have those available. And I'm available for any question anyone may have.
There was a question in the chat. Could you email out an update? I'm happy if you want to send that to me, then I can put it in my meeting notes to everybody to send out with the recording.
Perfect. I can do that. Yeah, I can do that.
Great. Any other questions for Christopher? Nope. Okay. Thanks for hopping on. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. You all have a good day.
Thank you. Okay. Carla. Where are you? There you are. Spend down for the biennium. You're up.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone really wants to talk about money that much anymore. So I'm gonna make it short and very sweet. I sent an email a little bit before this meeting, just sending some reminders out that if there's any reports or EGMS claims that are from older quarters or older time periods, just want to make sure that you guys get those in as soon as possible to me. And the most recent period that just ended, it's not due till the end of May, but just keeping in mind that we're getting close to the end of biennium and the transition to DELC, it'll make my life easier and everyone's life easier if those reports come in sooner rather than later, so I can get you guys paid out as quickly as possible. The email had the dates for both hubs and coordinated enrollments, and the quarter period. So you have those to reference. And then additionally, last month I mentioned about Raise Up Oregon reporting, and I totally dropped the ball and I didn't send that email out to you. So I sent it out today with a screenshot of where you can put your expenses for Raise Up Oregon on there as well. If there's any questions about submitting any EGMS claims or questions about your quarterly reports, feel free to send me an email, and I am more than happy to go through individually with each hub and figure out what we need to do to get that in. Okay, I try to go as fast as I could.
Any questions for Carla?
All right, thank you.
Really just want to shift gears a little bit because we didn't get to start with good news. And I specifically, yes, Lisa, sorry, but that was mid-sentence. Yes, I can get a list. I can put those in the email that I send out. I specifically wrote down something that I wanted to say to some folks on this call first. So I'm going to go back to the good news part of our meeting. First, I just want to say thank you to Renee and the Southern Oregon Hub for hosting Carmen and I in the midst of planning your partner dinner. It was a lot of work to put into hosting us and letting us tour sites in your area, but you still did it while planning this amazing dinner that was such a wonderful celebration and such a great convening of partners and cross-sector partners and all of the systems work that you do. I feel like I learned so much about the reach of the hub and the dedication of all of the people in your area, and was absolutely blown away by the work that's happening in your region. So congratulations on everything that you're doing, and thank you so much for inviting us. We really appreciate that. My second good news, or thank you and appreciation, is for Dorothy, Kelly, Begonia, and again, Renee. Thank you so much for presenting at the Early Learning Council. You all did so well in representing hub work and talking about the system as a whole, I felt. Kelly, when you brought in talking about the root causes and having the Early Learning Council approach those, I was like, yes, Erin Watson's going to be so proud at how much this work is sinking in. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for representing Hubs. Everyone was so well spoken, and just really appreciate you all doing that. Any other good news that anybody wants to share? It's okay if you don't, but I just really wanted to interject that into the meeting. Okay. We can move on then to thank you to our folks who are joining us about the early learning transition check-in. I will let all of you introduce yourselves, and sorry, you have a shortened time frame.
Thanks, Hillary. Can you give us a time sense of how much time we have?
About 27 minutes.
Okay, not bad. Well, greetings, everyone. Good to see some awesome faces, some familiar faces as well. My name is Karina Guzman Ortiz, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm partner engagement specialist with the Early Learning Division. Carmen did ask in the chat if I was what weather I'd be. And I'm going to say I'd be a sunny day at the coast. So I'm putting some geographic location there because Carmen's background is inspiring. Well, I'm here with my colleagues, Lauren and Rachel, who will give us a second to introduce themselves, but we're here to share about the early learning transition check-in, and we'll be shortly screen sharing here. We have some information to share with you, but also want to make sure that we allow some time for questions. Throughout and towards the end of this information that we'll be sharing, and we'll also have an interactive Jamboard for you all to add questions, comments, feedback as we go and afterwards. So we'll keep it live for you to have some time to digest the information, go back to the materials, which we'll be happy to share, and add anything else that might come to mind. So wanting to kind of share that up front. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. We have 3 partners here today from the Early Learning Division. This project, however, the Early Learning Transition Check-in, is in collaboration, is a joint partnership with the Oregon Department of Education and soon to be Department of Early Learning and Care. On our next slide, you can see, our mission for each of our organizations, and which I won't read to you, familiar with it perhaps, but just wanted to pose that there and just really emphasize that this is a collaborative collaborative project that we've been working on. I'll go ahead and let my colleagues here introduce themselves before we move on.
Hi, I'm Rachel Elliott. I am the Head Start Collaboration Director for the Early Learning Division, and so glad to be invited here. Thank you.
Thanks, Karina. I'm Lauren Sigmund. I'm a preschool specialist with the Early Learning Division, and I'm new to this work. Previously, I worked for a school district on the coast, and I also served on the governing board of our local regional hub since it was created. So happy to be back in front and working with you all and sharing this with you.
Thank you, Rachel and Lauren. As we go through, I'm sure some folks are already, your brains might already be thinking about, well, what is this early learning transition check-in? What is this? So just to kind of spark some memories, we will be sharing about what was formerly the kindergarten assessment. So this is the rebranding that we're currently doing, and this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the permanent name, but wanting to move away from kindergarten transition. So I'll kind of just let folks, as I talk through, if there is a word or two or a sentiment that comes to mind when you think about kindergarten assessment and what that meant for you or what that looked like, whatever memory comes to mind, feel free to jot that down in the chat. Just want to kind of take people back who might be familiar with the former kindergarten assessment. And if not, it's totally okay. There's no right or wrong answer. Just wanting to get your brains around this topic. But for today, we'll go over briefly the Oregon history of the kindergarten assessment, and then share about what is the early learning transition check-in, what work has been going on, what is currently happening, and what is to come, as at least from what we currently know. As we know, things are constantly changing. Focus specifically on how we are centering equity in this project, the specific project goals, and then the pilot components from last year, this year, and a timeline of sorts into the future. And I don't have the chat, but I wanted to see if there is. Okay, well, take a second to reflect as I go through and continue sharing here. Who we serve, ODE, ELD, right? We're talking about children all across the state. And so as you might be aware, at the state level, we don't capture information for all children 0 to 5. We capture only information at the statewide level for children receiving services from publicly funded programs. And we know that those are small percentages overall. So that means that on any given year, we only have statewide data for, a ballpark of 25% of incoming kindergartners. For 2023, for this upcoming fall, we're expecting approximately 40,000 kindergartners across the state. And so to think that we don't have information in regards to services received or provided to when it comes to in-home childcare services, for example, for many of these children, because that is not data that we require, that is not data that we have access to. So the revision of the assessment of the former kindergarten assessment is intended to support the data gathering across the state from eventually all kindergartners to inform and improve the early learning system. So that is one very key piece of this, is that this information is intended, will be intended, and the process is intended to inform the early learning system, which is something that we have not had before. And it wasn't necessarily the previous purpose of the kindergarten assessment. If anyone wants to kind of just come off mute or put a word in the chat, when you think about the previous Oregon kindergarten assessment, and it had different acronyms, right? OKA, the KA, depending perhaps on like school or region, it just, folks called it differently. But if there's anything that comes to mind when you think about it, I'd love to hear, we'd love to read before we move on to the next portion of why we are redesigning this assessment.
What I liked about it, Karina, is that it offered consistent data across the region and across the state, by which we can measure kindergarten readiness. May not have been perfect, right? There were lots of flaws with it. I'm not always really confident that, it was implemented correctly, but at the end of the day, we could use the data to help inform decisions about what and where we did to help to support children and families in making their transition to kindergarten.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that.
I just want to go off of that. We actually had some of the opposite issues. When we tried to use it, we had a lot of school districts tell us that it was not helpful and we shouldn't be using it because each school district administered certain parts of it differently. And so it wasn't really a reliable way, especially for child behavior and like self-regulation skills, because some schools would implement, like how that was measured was different. And in the window of when to measure it, not the self-regulation, but the actual academic scales could impact how much a child knew. So if they did it before school started or 6 weeks after school started, then that would change too. So we had a lot of partners tell us not to use that data when we made decisions for our region.
Thank you. And I see some similar reflections in the chat. And I mean, I appreciate it honestly, because there is never a one, a blanket result or approach or response, right? And so in what we can see in this next slide is the challenges with the prior version, and some of those things that you mentioned are exactly there, right? And to Lisa's point, it was a data tool that gave us information across regions and across the state, right? And that is something that we, since the kindergarten assessment was paused in 2020, COVID kind of came in, seemed to be perfect timing for it at that point, but it was already in process of being paused and being redesigned. It's that recognition that since then we don't have a statewide data gathering tool for incoming kindergartners, and we don't have a statewide gathering tool for 0 to 5-year-olds either. So there have been, there was a lot of information gathered from families, from educators, from regional partners as well about what is the purpose of this. And is the timing the best piece, right? Is it assessing children's readiness for school, which a part of this is also reframing that to saying, are systems ready for children, right? And making sure that we're gathering that information so that we as systems and education providers can best support students and children that are coming in. So there was several concerns with that, about it not being culturally responsive, about it not necessarily being a tool that could be translated or that interpreters would be able to easily step in and support families who didn't necessarily speak English as a first language. And then about the, just as you highlighted there as well, not assessing the whole child, it was very specific to some of those quote unquote academic skills. So all of these things considered have fed into the revision and then have also continued to inform the redesign process, which will say we as a team, you know, in partnership with ODE have continued to attempt to center equity and really think about what does this process look like, and with that ongoing engagement and recognizing that we do and we will want to call that out now, but we'll speak a little to it a little bit more of wanting to continue and seek out more engagement from the regional partners, because once that data is ready, who is going to be using that, right? And it won't just be ODE and ELD, but also regional partners. So wanting to make sure that we also just highlight that equity has been at the center of this work for both early learning and the K-12 system. We don't, do not yet equitably support Oregon's children and families. And so in this project, our focus is on those two communities, on the communities that we know have been underserved by our systems and our education system, including children and families who speak languages other than English and children and families of color. That is a quick overview of the background. I know I'm just going like, phew, just wanting to make sure that we ground ourselves in that, but I'll go ahead and pass it over to Lauren, perfect timing, to go over what is this shift and what does it look like right now?
Thanks, Karina. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about, now we know the things that we need to change to make it better now that we know better. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those shifts that are happening with the current redesign. As Karina mentioned, it's a collaborative project. We're replacing the old kindergarten assessment with a new way of collecting information. We're shifting away from measuring children's readiness for kindergarten and thinking more about how our systems, our program, our policies, our educators are ready for the children that are coming to kindergarten. And we really want to focus on expanding, looking at beyond children's academic performance, thinking about the whole child, thinking about the family as they enter school. So with that in mind, our project goals as we're doing this work is to reflect back on the information that was shared and what we know to be true. So incorporating anti-racist practices in that information gathering process to make sure we're not continuing to do any further harm to historically marginalized communities, children, and families. We want to elevate the voices in the community around gathering information to help inform the design. So that includes you as partners, the families you serve, children and families, other early learning partners. We want to strengthen the connection between families and educators. What was very clear is that nobody wants the child's first experience in kindergarten to be sitting down and taking an assessment. So instead, what do we want that first experience to look like? And we're shifting this component of the early learning transition check-in to focus more on building that connection between families and educators rather than trying to get information from them. We need the information to help inform our programs, practices, and policies at local, regional, and state levels. So without solid data about the experiences that children and families have before school, we are only guessing, right, at what we should be doing to best meet the needs of the families we serve. So we want the tool to be able to inform all of those levels of the system. And we want to improve those efforts to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all the children and families that we're serving in Oregon. Skip that one. So the timeline currently is that we're piloting a component of this right now with 12 school districts throughout the state, and Rachel's going to talk a little bit more about what that component looks like. We're going to continue to pilot that this upcoming year, and then move into doing a statewide field test of just the component that we've been piloting currently. I want to really iterate that this timeline is long intentionally, because throughout the process, we want to be engaging with the families that participated, gaining information from families as they left kindergarten, what their experience was like, engaging with our early learning partners as the data piece becomes more relevant. So after we start doing a broader pilot and get the data back, taking a look at what that data is telling us, making sure that we're going back and revising the information that we're gathering to make sure it's really speaking to what we needed to, and also designing a data tool and reporting system that makes sense for you as early learning partners at the regional level, what it might look like at the state level, and really having the opportunity to take our time and make those changes along the way based on the feedback and data that we're receiving. So currently, as I mentioned, we're piloting in school districts for this fall. It's our second pilot. It's scaling up to a few more to really test the capacity of leveling up the components. And we're continuing to engage with our community partners, with educators and families. There will be feedback gathered throughout that process from both educators and families who participate. We currently have an advisory panel that meets to help guide us in the work. And we are continuing to share the message about the early learning transition check-in, and it's designed to help gain more information, to get more people involved, and to make sure we're really getting a wide breadth of feedback from all the partners and families who could participate. I'm going to shift it to Rachel. She's going to talk about the actual components that are being piloted, and she will pause and let you ask questions and offer feedback. So I know we're going kind of fast and furious, but I just want you to know you'd have an opportunity to do that too. So Rachel.
Yeah.
Rachel and Lauren, there's a question in the chat for you. Do you have a list of those involved in the pilot sites?
I do. I can get that and paste it in the chat while Rachel is presenting.
And then there's a second question. Can you share who is on the advisory panel, what region and or sector they represent?
Great. Yep, I can post both those things. And Rachel, why don't you?
Yeah, so the first component of the early learning transition check-in project, the creation of a family conversation, was put in place to invite the engagement of families and educators to build that foundational relationship. Many stated from the first pilot in 2022 that it felt more at ease having these types of conversations with the families versus having something else like a checklist to get through. The vision is that each fall, kindergarten educators will meet one-on-one with the families that are entering their classrooms. The family conversation is meant to provide a structure to support educators to have an initial getting to know you conversation with the children and parents/caregivers. The questions in the conversation will help us as a unit. As Lauren mentioned, there's a lot of different layers to when I'm saying us about collecting information about children and families. They will, like I said, the main purpose of this is just to begin that foundational relationship and rapport with the family. So again, the first component is considered a family conversation. If you were familiar or a part of the first pilot or knew those who did do the first pilot in 2022, this title of family conversation is brand new. So this was changed per our advisory committee. And again, any questions you can unmute or put in the chat as I continue, as I'm trying to get through the information for you. Next slide, please. So again, just to emphasize, this is we're still in pilot. Everything is going to be continued engagement and feedback as we go through the pilot. So these are the initial conversation questions that the pilot emphasizes for educators to ask families in this type of conversation process. So I will read them. I mean, I'll let you read them for a moment, but we will definitely send out the slides so you have an opportunity to look at the questions more in depthly, so you can ask questions in the Jamboard. All right, next slide, please. So after those initial conversation starter questions, that's build that rapport with families, the teachers will then go into another set of questions to collect information about the children and families' experiences with early learning care prior to kindergarten. The information families share in response to these questions will be most directly relevant to for ELD and ODE. That is our understanding from as we're going through these pilots. Okay, next slide.
Sorry, Rachel, there's a question in the chat about are the family conversations happening at the school, or would those be at the family's home or after hours for working families?
Lauren or Karina can jump into this will be part of the, go ahead, Lauren, I see you unmuted, go ahead.
So yes, to all the above, the districts will get to plan and schedule those conversations to best meet the needs of their family. Those most likely will mostly occur at the school building to welcome the families in, with the intent of having culturally responsive scheduling to meet the needs of the families for the times and hours that they're able to meet. Districts are also welcome to offer them as a home visit to make those connections too. So during this pilot, we're really interested in seeing how different districts develop those schedules with families to really meet their needs in a culturally responsive way.
Any other questions before we move to the next slide? Okay, next slide, please. So let me get to my slide here. We want to improve experiences both in kindergarten and the early learning and care sector to figure out how to best support families no matter what experience they choose for their child prior to kindergarten. To help with the kind of visual emphasis of what we're talking about, this is a draft of a visual we are working on to help show the intent of the early learning transition check-in and the systems that it will be informed. In order to make data-informed decisions that are equity focused, the tools need to be child-centered, which is that bottom green circle. We need to prepare school communities, so shift from getting families and children ready for school to schools being prepared and ready for all students. And then ready districts, planning on support classrooms and staff, and then ready systems, policy and budget priorities that address the real gaps in services and needs of children and families. So again, this is a type of just infographic, a visual infographic of the hope of foundational layers, and we would love some feedback on this as well in the Jamboard. So it looks like with how fast we all talked, there is a couple minutes to have some reflection in the Jamboard. So if we could put that link, please, in the chat. These are the questions we are asking in the Jamboard for you to consider and really be authentic and transparent with your questions, thoughts, and comments. There's also an additional Jamboard page that's just for any additional comments or questions outside of the questions that we're asking in this reflection bullet points. So thank you. The Jamboard link is in the chat. If someone can give me a thumbs up that you can open it, that would be really helpful. Can any, oh, Hillary can, thanks Hillary. So we're gonna give you a couple minutes just to kind of absorb the fast-paced information we gave you, give you an opportunity to ask questions to us, but also be in the Jamboard to start adding anything that has already top of mind for you. So I will mute myself and give you that opportunity.
So the transition assessment, if you assessment in air quotes, is just the 4 questions.
So currently what's being piloted is the family conversation, which is, it's all 8 questions.
Okay.
It's, yeah, a meeting between the educators and the families to welcome them to school, to build that connection and to ask those questions. And the intent for the first 4 questions is really just to build that connection and the rapport. And early learning, we do this a lot, right? We have parent orientation, we have this type of welcoming. It's something that is really important. And we know as kids transition into school, building that connections with teachers is really important for families and kids. And so we want to push that up, and we want to provide space for that to happen. And by making it a part of this redesign of what kids do when they enter kindergarten, it's really giving permission and allowing space and helping structure how that can happen throughout all districts as a really important component of supporting that transition for kids and families.
And in our wrap-up email, we will all send out the link for the Jamboard, the link for more information, and the slides. So you don't have to do it now. You can have time to think about this as well to make sure you're giving really thoughtful feedback.
I have a question, Hillary. So when you say, is this information helpful? Are you saying the information about the early learning transition project? Because it's the first time I've heard about it. So is that information helpful? Or are you saying is the information that we get from parents in the family sessions helpful? What information is this question referring to?
Yeah, great question. So it's the information that we're going to glean from the family conversations. And so what was really we're still working on is drafting questions that feel conversational and welcome that connection with families, but also help inform the experiences that families have before school so that we are getting that data, right? And so what information is helpful to you as regional partners about the experiences that children have before school? Because not only are we getting that data, but we have to code it and theme it, right, in ways that really help us understand what the needs are of families. So if there are specific things like, hey, I'd really like to know how many families are involved in publicly funded versus private pay early learning, because I think that's going to help inform our system. Or I want to know how many kids and families have no access to anything before school. Those types of things about what's really important to inform your work or to what you wish you knew at a regional or statewide level to help either inform the practices and decisions that you all are doing or at the state level. So that's kind of what the question is after.
This sounds really similar to what we're doing with our KPI fund, Kindergarten Innovation and Partnership. And so so we've been working to gather this kind of information at a local level. So you're asking us as how the information at a regional or state level is going to help us? Is that what you're asking?
Right. Or if you know, in that process, if you already have some solid questions that get you the information you need, please share that as feedback so we can look at how we could scale that up to this component as well.
I think knowing who's on those panels, like, do you already have representation from my region or from a sector that is in my community would be helpful too. So I think that might help me to answer this question.
I can put that in. I didn't want to disturb the presentation, but we do have a website and I'll share that again. I don't want to interrupt your questions either. But there is.
I think we got the website, but it doesn't tell you who's actually on the panel.
And the who on the panel, the panelist members are under the understanding that their information, that their names are essentially private up to this point. And they've been on the panel for 2 years now. So we're actually currently, we'll see this on a slide, we were recruiting because we do have some vacancies. Some of the folks are unable to continue. And so they've completed 2 years. And that was in part because of the political and educational climate where things were when this project first picked up in like 2021 and whatnot. So I will go also back and just check in with our partners at ODE to touch base on that, on like what, whether we're able to release names, like for one, because we had had an agreement with the panelists. But the other thing that I will say is that we have been reaching out to folks across the state, and that is something that we've been looking at even as we go through the pilot schools, right? Making sure that it's not just I-5 corridor, but that we are also looking outside of that. So we'll go ahead, gather a list of, again, what regions are represented, and then the sectors. You know, we do have people who are we have kindergarten teachers, for example, school administrators. We have researchers from higher ed to also help us in design, you know, help us in the data analysis of the work. But there's a lot of work that is still happening, and we are looking at bringing on additional panel members to continue informing the work. I will also add that in the engagement process, we, for example, last year after the first pilot, we partnered with Oregon Kitchen Tables to help us to conduct conversations, community conversations with the families that participated at the different schools. So they did that at different classroom levels and school levels, and also with the educators who implemented the conversation. So some of those were, you know, teachers, kindergarten teachers, some of those might have been administrators who also supported in the piloting process. And for this upcoming pilot, for the 2023 fall pilot, the engagement will look a little different. We're looking at doing, we're currently working on our contract, and so trying, you know, sort out what it looks like exactly. But the thought process so far is looking at regional conversations, right? Like what is happening within this region, what is, and the different partners that might be within there, so including families and, you know, community-based organizations, that is hubs, so that we can bring different voices into, okay, well, now that we are piloting and looking at how we are implementing this new process, we need to start looking at the data component, right? How are we collecting? That is one piece that we've also been revising, but then also how are we sharing that back and in one format, and are there data elements that are missing? We aren't currently revising the questions, but that is something that, you know, this is an ongoing process. So there might still be an opportunity for us to revise those questions and refine if, to your point, Kelly, this is, you know, data that is captured somewhere else, or if there's other questions that are already being piloted elsewhere that, you know, might be better suited for a statewide data gathering system. So it's the neat thing about the pilot process is that it's bringing people, bringing schools and districts on board and getting that buy-in, because they're also seeing that, oh, if we have these conversations with families as children are coming in, our educators are able to, you know, revisit their plans or rearrange their classrooms, you know, simple things that they might be able to do and prepare early on in the school year, because they're getting to connect with families and building those relationships. So there's a lot of work to do. To me, it's really exciting to see this, but we also recognize that we have more engagement to do, and especially, you know, I would admit with our hub partners, so all of you who are here today. And if there are any thoughts or questions or even suggestions on how to engage, we are open to hearing that. Want to take your lead on what that might look like, recognizing that you already have a community and a meeting cadence.
Thank you all so much. I know we're over time, so thanks everyone for joining. And I will be sending out all the information in an email either later on today or early tomorrow.